Welcome back to part 2 of our Sibling series on the Your Next Gen Friend podcast. If you missed the first episode, definitely go give that a listen. We covered some big emotions, family roles, and what it's really like to grow up in the business. Plus, you'll get to meet our 3 panelists as part of this series. Today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. You'll hear about the real unspoken expectations, who plays what role in their family and their business, and what happens when vulnerability meets leadership. Let's get into it.
One thing I wanted to say to Andrew and ask, I really love the fact that you talk about how you and your brother are able to lean on each other and support each other. And that's exactly what I want for my children. Shannon, I know that you'd said that you kind of wish that some of the things that Andrew said were things that you had. And one of those big things that I didn't have was, Andrew, what you said about your parents not just being good at business, but also really intentional with creating their legacy and having their children work together. And that's so important. That's something that, it wasn't really much of a focus of my father's, anything that I was going to do. It was very much about putting out his own fires. And I understand that, but that's a different perspective change that I've had, that I've always focused on, that I've let my children know from a very young age. Look, everything that we're doing, that the goal is for you to be able to take the ball and run with it to other levels, to higher levels. And so that's super important, and I really appreciate that. And Shannon, one thing that it sounds like maybe you didn't have, and I wanted to ask about, is it sounds like maybe there was a sudden loss there. And did you guys have any kind of a sudden exit crisis plan? And if not, how would it have changed if you had? This is one of the things that I
Yeah,
know it's
no,
extremely
I
important
appreciate
in a
you.
sibling.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up. It was sudden, but not sudden in a way. Our dad had like a gradual health decline over, I wouldn't say gradual, it felt quite rapid over 6 months. Like I remember signing him up for hospice and him laughing at me, and he died 6 months to the day. So we did not have a plan. Where where this conversation is making me reflect is on a conversation that I am starting to have with my 2 brothers in particular, of like sometimes the strengths or the skills that are needed in Gen 1 is going to be a totally different set for Gen 2. And one of those, I think, is the skill of collaboration, of communication. And so many of us had the example of my mom and my dad, and really it was my dad who just kind of like charged like a bull, expanded this business so rapidly in so little time, like in one generation. And while many of us have that as like, this is the pinnacle that we should aspire to, it's like, no, actually, for us to be successful in Gen 2, we've got to be over communicating. I've got to be letting Nick know what's happening with the pivot at 1511 today. And Joe's got to be letting Nick know what's going on over here. And I have to give somebody a heads up. So to go back to your initial question, no, we didn't have a plan. Do I wish we would have? I think I am so grateful for the planning that my parents did do for the estate planning side. You know, we're so covered in so many ways. And I'm so grateful for the flexibility of my 2 brothers and the skill set of my 2 brothers, that they had what you described of how you're trying to engage with your sons right now. They had the knowledge, like they were ready to go. You know, I'm sure if I asked them today, they would tell you, Shan, we've been running it for a while, but we just kind of still gave dad that feeling like he was in charge. And that takes a really gracious, humble person to do that. And that's the same transition that I'm trying to have with our mom right now on that side of the business.
I'm hearing this really cool theme of like personality and strengths and like individuality of each of you, each of us, with the roles that we play inside our family units now, inside these businesses, and how that aligns kind of with just like who we are as people, and the things that we've been able to learn. So I'm curious, like when you think of your individual strengths and how that developed into your role, how does that also tie into like the family role that you had? Because I'm the oldest. I think I'm the only oldest on this call. I'm the oldest, and so that like big sister, you're the leader thankfully, that really aligns with some of my natural skills and things that I really enjoy. But I could see how that would be in conflict if there was kind of this like perception that someone expected outside of that. So I get a family role, big sis, baby brother, peacemaker. I've always been the person who's that. Like, how do those roles show up, and does it clash or support that role that you play in the business?
For me, I want to go back to something that I said earlier is that, and make sure I'm clear, I think my parents never really wanted us in the business. It was open to it. And I knew intuitively I wanted to be there. And a big piece of that is I wanted to be my dad, right? Like that's what I saw. My brother Matt had never had an interest in doing it, and he's talked pretty publicly about just how he felt because we started with nursing homes, right? And so he felt he's very vulnerable in saying in front of our entire trade association, I didn't feel comfortable in them, right? So I think that role is why I'm going back to this. That story is why I'm going back to this piece with the role, is that in preparing for this call, I think the hardest piece about family dynamics is the age piece, because you were saying earlier, Andrea, like being the oldest, like I am the leader, but the flip side to that is leaders can't be vulnerable. Leaders don't make mistakes. Leaders are the older brother or sister who are going to protect you. And so when you're downstream and you see your older siblings struggling or going through a growth phase, it's really bizarre because you never saw them really go through that because of the dynamic. So working with my brother and sister has really opened up a very empathetic side for it. And that's come over time, because at first it's so weird. Like you don't see them screw up. You don't see them have any faults. And you're like, hey man, you messed that up. He's like, no, I didn't. Like, yeah, you did, right? But and so that dynamic ends up being what you would say to a colleague and say, hey, Shannon, that wasn't right. He's like, oh, Jesus Christ, you're right. I didn't do that right. But to your sibling, no, I did it right. And you kind of hold on to it. So I think over time, the empathy has really shown a light on the struggles of the intergenerational or the same generation in the same business, is that we're not allowed to grow on the same path. And so I'm the little brother. So you got the built-in excuse, oh, he's young, he's this, he's that, or, whatever. But he doesn't have that, right? He has the weight of the world in our family business on his shoulders, and he has to carry that silently. And for me, I have a ton of empathy for him. And I think I would describe our partnership as an accordion. It can stretch out and come back in, and it makes different sounds along the way. But if you're paying attention and playing the keys, it can make something really cool. So over 20 years of working with him and him being my brother for 46 years, I think the tunes we play have adjusted based on where we're at, but it's come out in a pretty harmonious way.
I don't know. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that
Go ahead,
pressure.
Shannon.
No, I was just gonna say that pressure that you described, Andrew, like you do feel that. You do feel even like Shannon, when the first time we talked and you're stepping into your mom handles a lot of the financial components, like the role or like the capacity or the expectation of what a specific role is also carries, just by nature of the responsibilities of that role, pressures and inside of that too, which is super fascinating.
Yeah, I guess if I go back to your initial question of, I don't know, I think about like birth order and how it comes into play. Ours is really interesting because there's 12 of us. And if you've done some of the research, they say that birth order roles repeat themselves like after so many kids. So I am the youngest, and I guess I can see where birth order plays out. And I remember a really vulnerable conversation I had with my brother Joe in particular. He is 19 years older than me. He's actually my godfather. So there's a lot of tension. I wouldn't say tension, but just like deference that maybe I would default to a lot with him. And I remember when we really started getting into the thick of things, being vulnerable with him and saying, hey, I want to let you know that this is a thing that I'm worried could play out. So naming it in advance And it's provided so much more spaciousness for me to feel safe to push back now when things are going a certain way, because we had that. Like we put it on the table. Like, this is a thing that might show up because you're 19 years older than me. You know a hell of a lot more about farming than I do. And to have his support for me in return. And the same with my brother Nick. Nick and I are much closer in age. Some of these siblings, you guys, like, I didn't even grow up in the house at the same time as them, you know? Nick and I are closer in age. We grew up together, so there's just more familiarity there. But then the other piece of it that I think they see in me, I don't know, I might be speaking out of turn, what my role has become. I wouldn't say I'm the peacemaker, because there might not always be peace all the time in our family. But I am starting to see my role as a person who can broker agreements, where we can come to a consensus and move forward. There are some major decisions we had to make this past year about how much land we wanted to push into solar. And I'm telling you, like, if I hadn't focused on playing that role, no decision would have been made. And then everybody would have walked away from the table feeling bitter in some way. So not everybody's happy about what we're doing, but can we broker agreements to get to a place that we can all live with?
Mark, did you have any thoughts on this one?
A lot. um, that was a lot, Andrew, and it really hit home in a lot of ways. Um, First of all, my personal strengths are having a teacher's heart and really is the peacemaker, which is why I stayed in the business and my older brother didn't. Him and my father majorly butted heads. Shannon, I love the term that you said, all chiefs and no Indians. It's exactly what that was. And so when I was younger, I definitely was more of the Indian and kind of ended up being the chief, but still play that, that peacemaker role a lot. And I see that happening more as I grow older and I watch my sons develop. And Andrew, what you said about your older brother not being able to be vulnerable, and I totally understand that. I don't know if it's always a good thing. I think that one of the things that I've really tried to push with my children is that it's okay to fail, and it's a very important part of it. It's very necessary for growth is to be able to fail and be comfortable failing and fail forward and fail often. That's a saying that we use around our house all the time. And I think in today's culture, and it's not only with our school systems, but also just with social media and just our entire society, is that people are terrified, especially our children are terrified to fail. It's really looked down upon, and I think that that's a real hindrance to anybody's leadership values if they're afraid to fail. They're going to be afraid to try new things, and they're going to feel bad about themselves when they fail. And that's something that I really try and stress a lot to my children. What I really wanted to touch up on, and what you said that really resonated with me, is how you have a lot of empathy towards your brother because of the pressure that he feels. And I I see that in my oldest is very how do I want to say it? He's just that guy that's just good at everything, and he doesn't fail very often, and he puts a ton of pressure on himself, which is why he excels at all the things that he does. But it's something that I have really reinforced with him throughout the years, is that it's okay to be vulnerable. You're not going to be perfect all the time, and that's part of growth. And he's much better with it now, I believe, because of the activity that I've had with him on that. And I will continue to do that. And Shannon, with the roles that you discussed, especially about the age difference, is extremely important, because each age, and this is something that I also recognize and welcome into my business, is that the age difference, there's so many different strengths that come with that, right? And I know that my son, my oldest, is much, things that younger people have that older people don't is a better understanding of new technology, whatever that is, whatever age it is. The younger people are going to be more in touch with technology and also with just cultural dynamics. He relates and communicates so much better with our employees. We have a young staff, a young team. I think the oldest is mid 30s, and many of them are in their 20s, and so he's closer to their age than I am, and that has developed a much smoother form of communication throughout our company, and everything just flows better from the time that he was kind of handed over the general um, just kind of handling the daily operations, the management, and that's really something that we have to recognize. If I were to still stay in this form of that, no, I'm in charge, I'm going to be the one that tells everybody what to do, that would be a hindrance to us, because he's better at that now, and again, like I said, it allows me to do other things like this, and so those are just some of my thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Can I go the empathy? Sorry, can I go back to that point? Not can I go like a little kid? Like I want to go now. Um, um, the empathy piece is really important, right? And I think you just heard it from Mark. And the empathy piece developed in me towards my siblings as I failed. Is it in the moment you want to lash out and protect yourself, and that little gremlin inside you that says I'm perfect. It's like I'm there. It's okay. And so I realized one day that I wasn't giving him the grace that he was providing me. And, I think that the number one thing that challenges a family business is that approval of dad and mom. And it really hit me that we're both chasing that same thing. And when I could take myself out of my shoes, and Shannon said it earlier twice, tension, right? That word tension is meaningful to me because I think everybody in a family business feels it at times, whether it's at a holiday party or a meeting. And it really is anxiety of you don't know what's going to happen next. It's fear of the future. And so once I understood that he was going through it the same way I was, and he was most likely feeling the same thing, it allowed me to reframe it and put us back in the same boat. And when I was in that boat, I could clearly see that I could do his job. But conversely, he could do mine, but it wouldn't be the same. So why am I all bent out of shape that what I wanted to have happen exactly didn't happen when the outcome was there? So when Shan talks about not being a peacemaker, but being a broker, I think that's a wonderful piece to take away from this podcast, is that there's never going to be true peace. There's only going to be brokerage of times of peace. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. So you can't say, I am this, because maybe in 6 years, you're not that person. Right? And the problem isn't that same thing. But if you can come back to the commonalities, and that's really what empathy is, it's recognizing that something is hard. If you sympathize with it, say, oh, I know exactly how you feel. My aunt did that. Well, no, it's my dad did it to me, not my aunt. You're a woman, I'm a man. It's very different. So to recognize and empathize of the feeling of tension, the feeling of pain, the feeling of fear, the feeling of anxiety is really, I think, the one piece that flipped my experience on its head from being one that was probably negative and a drag on me to one of being very positive. Because in the end, I realized that we're all in the same boat. He's me living a different life, and he's 8 years ahead of me, and he's just trying to do his best. He had kids that are older than mine, so they were getting through. Like, I have teenage girls. He's got one. Like, I'm pissed off at him about something at work, and he's carrying that stress, right? I've got a wife. He's like, you forget that he's you or they're them, and you just giving people grace is, I think, the number one thing I tell everybody in a family business, because it hits back to the same points that you've all made, right? Is that I am me, I'm good at these things, I can't hold on to them forever, and how do I pass them on? That's the core of a family business? How do I perpetuate this thing to the next generation? And you have to fail and learn. And the goal should be that your 12-year-old son or daughter should be more advanced than you at 12. And at 20, they should know more than we knew at 20 and 40 and 60 and 80. So finding that piece to empathize and say, I don't want you to make this mistake, but not making it preachy, being vulnerable, is that when Matt and I are vulnerable with one another, and really, frankly, all four of us, when we're vulnerable, good things happen. And it gives the space for people that have the qualities like Shannon talks to about being that broker to come out. A broker needs supply and demand. If there's no supply, there's no demand. And if people are only making demands, there's no supply for Shannon to work with. So everyone talks about communication, it's going to be perfect. That's absolutely trash. The only problem that there is no communication. I will take poor communication over no communication every day of the week, because the poor communication drives back the empathy point. Why aren't we? What's going on? What's in his role? What's in her role today? How do I connect to move forward? And you can't do that without some form of communication.
Awesome.
And the move, if I can just speak to this, and the move from no communication to poor communication can be really tense sometimes. Mm-hmm. So buckle up. But I could not agree more that poor is better than none. And for a little minute there, we had none, and we're working our way up to poor in certain relationships, and then we're moving from poor to better, and growing all of our capacity to sit with that, to sit in the discomfort as we are all leveling up our skills.
And that relationship, so I'm curious where we all fall on the fence here. There's obviously that business relationship and that capacity there, which in a family business spills into just your relationship as a family and your relationship as siblings. So when you think of, a lot of times you see like, business doesn't come to the holiday table. Like if we're gathering for a holiday, we don't want to talk about that. Like that maybe for some families is their reality, and for some families that's not their reality. So where do you sit on that fence around like, this is the family and this is my sibling relationship with you versus this is our business relationship, and now I'm putting on that business hat and we're going to have a conversation like we're in business together? And is there a distinction for you or not?
I think at one point in time, I tried that. We have a family code of conduct that clearly states that there's no discussions of business at family outings, and no alcohol at business discussions with family. Irish Catholic. But I've done a 180 there. Like, how do you do that? Like it's impossible, right? Because I'm going to shut off a portion of myself, and you're going to ask me to focus on not saying something, which is going to make someone say something. I think it's maturity. It's gotten a lot better as we've gotten older and more mature, and all done a lot of work. I think all four of us have done our own things to improve ourselves. But I have, most of my friends are in a family business, and all of them have gone through the same thing. Like, how do you separate Shannon, your sister, from Shannon, your boss? It's just not going to happen. So just recognize that today we're at a family event, and let's be a family. And if things come up, draw a hard line. Like for a long time, my dad and I had tension around business stuff. So he'll try and bring up, I'm not going there, dude. I don't talk about healthcare with him, and I don't talk business because he's got folks to talk to. I need a father. I do not need someone to tell me that the P&L is off or the NOI is this, or, hey, I want to buy this. Can you guys make some more money, please? Like he's got people for that. I need a dad. And so I think for me, that's been the number one thing, is just recognizing that it's impossible to do, but it's possible to reframe your mindset going into something and create boundaries. And that boundary process comes with time in this saddle and being mature, I think.
All right, that was awesome. I feel like every time I listen to that conversation again, something new hits me, especially about how we all carry different roles in our families, whether or not we ever talk about it out loud. In the final part of the series, part 3, we can explore how to build trust and not just keep the peace, and what it means to be a really good ancestor. I hope that you'll join us there.